of background about this session tonight. Sarah and I like to joke that our dean has nominated us to lead this webinar because we are the two staff who have gone through this process as parents. And together we have four young adults who are either in college or recently graduated. So we understand where you all are coming from and all of the feelings you might be feeling at this point. So to get started, I'd like to give you an overview of what we plan to cover in the next little bit of time. What we hope to share with you tonight is a very broad overview of the college application process. This is not Bowdoin specific, but rather an opportunity to try to give you a larger framework of understanding as you embark on this process. This is actually the first in a three-part series about the entire college application process. As the name of the event implies, we'll be asking students to think about a lot of different questions, all in an effort to help provide them with a launching point for their own individual college application process. So I'm going to introduce a number of terms and phrases, sometimes in rapid fire, and I'll do my best to then define and explain them as I go. So again, we encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask questions for clarification at any point. I plan to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then Sarah and I will use the remainder of the hour to answer any additional questions that come up. So I want to clarify that while this program is meant for both students and their family members and caregivers, I will be directing the questions towards the students with hopes that you can then use this as a way to frame future conversations you might have with your own children. So as I mentioned, this is part one in a three-part series that Sarah and I will offer throughout the spring. Part two will take place on March 19th and will dig into the various components of a college application and help you better understand how admissions officers review applications and how we put together a class. The third part, which will take place on April 24th, will cover the question of how do I learn more? And we'll talk about timelines, how to set up visits, doing interviews, and other activities and ideas that come up in this process of trying to learn a bit more. So we invite you to sign up for one, some, or all of the sessions and utilize them in whatever way is most helpful for you and your family. They will all be recorded and available on our website within about a week or so. So here we are, 9 to 12 months out from when your student is likely to be applying to college. For those of you who are parents of juniors, and we appreciate that we may have some parents of sophomores and first years out there too, but we are gearing this as though this is a group of juniors. So the first step is really to make a list. And actually, before you dive into action, this first step for students is to spend some time really looking inward. We encourage students to think broadly about what they want out of their college education. What is important now and what will be important in the college experience? What does your student like in high school that they are hoping to find in college? What are they looking forward to? For some of them, they will have very specific ideas about this. And for others, they will only have vague concepts. Regardless, both the specific and the vague will most likely change and evolve over the course of the next 9 to 10 months. And this is what the journey is about. But it is still important to start asking these questions to establish a baseline from which to launch. So the first step is really making that list. And there are a number of resources that can help approach this task, many of which are online. So resources such as the College Board, the FISC Guide, Naviance, and more will provide a series of questions that might help a student identify schools that appeal to them based on specific interests. They may help identify if you want a large research university or a smaller college. They might help you think about whether you'd like to be in the Northeast or whether warm climates are really important to your student. They also should seek out the advice and counsel of trusted adults, whether these are guidance counselors, family or community members, as well as older students who have recently completed this process, so that they can solicitate the ideas of others as well. Each person will be able to offer expertise and perspective that will help guide and inform the formation of that initial college list. So, if introspection feels too big a first step, there are a number of guiding questions that might help hone in on some key interests. Does your student have a specific academic interest or goal? Some students will have a very clearly defined academic interest that they wish to pursue in college. They are focused in a certain area, whether it's education, nursing, finance. Or maybe your student is someone who loves the study of language just as much as the study of science. Thinking about these types of questions may help direct the type of academic setting that your student is trying to pursue. Geography. This refers to both the region of the country or the world, but also the type of community that your student might be looking for a college, whether it's a city setting, a suburban area, a rural area. What is important in terms of campus culture and student life? Is your student best in small classes where they have a chance to get to know professors personally, or would they much prefer large lecture style classes? Are they interested in Greek life? What about Division One sports, whether it's playing it or cheering for their classmates and friends? Or would they rather be at a school where they can play sports, in which case maybe a Division Three school would offer a better fit? Do they want a residential experience or do they prefer to commute to school? Does weather matter? How far away from home do they want to be? As you consider all of these different ideas, please keep in mind your interest and career paths are bound to change, and that's okay. So, going a little bit deeper on the prior questions, there are different types of institutions to consider, and we'll talk more about these in a minute. But within each of these types of institutions, there are different academic offerings. For example, some schools will have specific distribution requirements. So if your student hates studying language, they probably don't want to pick a school with a language requirement. They'll want to understand how the various features of an institution align with the academic goals for that college experience. As part of this initial research, they should include understanding financial aid offerings at schools. Is merit aid part of the package? What is the average loan debt for students at graduation? Does a college meet a student's full financial need? These are all important factors to consider, and we'll talk more about them later in the presentation. They should also have a balance of selectivity on their list. What does this mean? So colleges range from admitting as few as 3% of students to admitting 100% of students. And your student's list should ideally have a range of selectivity rates, from some where you feel fairly certain you'd be admitted to some schools that might be more of a reach. Regardless of selectivity, be sure that any and all schools that are on your child's list are places that they could be excited to attend. So I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about selectivity. When we say selectivity, we are talking about the acceptance rate, or the percentage of applicants that are admitted to an institution in a given year. It does not indicate anything in particular about a specific institution, just that it receives more applicants from students than it is able to admit and enroll in its class. In FISC and other guides, you will see the admissions rate listed, and this will give you an indication of selectivity. What you will also see is that most college and university accept over half or more of their applicants. It is generally a very small number of schools that grab the headlines with their extremely low admission rates. To that point, it's important to note a few things around the topic of selectivity. Highly selective colleges are highly unlikely for any applicant. A student may be exceedingly well qualified for a school by every measure and may still have a 96% chance of not being admitted. So while your student may end up having a top choice school that really excites them, there is no one perfect school. And it's best to try to develop a realistic group of schools where your student feels as though they could really thrive. And finally, it's important to keep remembering that a college admissions decision is not a reflection of your worth or your ability to be successful in college. Admissions decisions made by schools reflect what a particular college is seeking in a specific context in a specific year. Schools seek to create a diverse community intellectually, socially, and culturally, and they admit based on these specific contexts. So earlier I mentioned types of institutions you might choose to consider. And I want to give you a sense of what this means. So there are liberal arts colleges where you will take courses across a breadth of curricula. There are research universities where you generally enter into one specific field of study and remain in that program for your 4 years. They're historically Black colleges and universities called HBCUs. They're single gender colleges. They're technical universities. They're religiously affiliated colleges. They're service academies like Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, and community colleges and 2-year institutions where you attain an associate's degree. You name it, they're out there. And yes, you can apply to different types, but it's important that your student understand the wide variety of offerings out there. Within these different institutions, one other element to consider is a type of class where they think they'd thrive. Look beyond the average class size to understand whether a school offers mostly lecture style classes, seminar style classes, labs, etc. So academic programs. As you consider these, it is important to remember that for most of us, majors and minors do not necessarily equal a career. Some students know exactly what they hope to study in college, and that can help as they look at the variety of options. But many 17 or 18-year-olds have no idea what they want to study in college, let alone what they want to do professionally. And that's okay. There is plenty of time to figure those questions out. They may just want to focus more on schools that allow flexibility and the opportunity to try different academic areas over the course of the 4 years. As your student starts to dig further into schools that might be of interest, there are a number of other campus opportunities that might make a difference as they start to think through what's important to them in college list making. Areas such as study abroad. How many students at the school study abroad? Does the school run their own program or do they collaborate with international schools? Does financial aid travel with the student? Career preparation. Every college and university will have career preparation, but it's important to look in a little bit more depth to understand what that means. What is the strength of the alumni community? What sort of skills development programs do they offer? Are there campus recruitment opportunities, and what does that entail on these particular campuses? What sort of research opportunities are there, and specifically, what does that look like? Is funding included with opportunities? Is there a chance to do summer research on the campuses? Are there opportunities for student-driven research, or are you always working with a faculty whose primary question it is that is being studied? What sort of community service opportunities are there? How involved are students in the local community? Is there a quote unquote bubble in the community and surrounding campus? Are community members present on campus? This can be very different based on different locations. And what do the town gown dynamics look like? This could be a concern among different students, and it's just important to know whether that is a factor that your child sees as important. What sort of clubs and affinity groups are there? How important is it for your child to find true home on campus? Are they looking for community in a variety of their identities, or are they more interested in focusing on schoolwork and doing their own thing? What sort of work study availability as it relates to jobs are there? Are jobs restricted to those that have federal work study, or are there additional jobs that anyone is able to obtain? What percentage of students work? Work study jobs and campus positions in general are often much more than just a source of extra income, but a good way to gain some professional development and learn what work can look like, and cultivating those special relationships with supervisors who may serve as future references. I mentioned earlier that there were a number of financial aid terms that we would go over, and we know that this is a topic that dominates many college conversations. And finding the right college fit typically means at least three things. There's the right academic fit, the right social fit, and probably most importantly, the right financial fit. So, along with understanding how to assess what a college can offer your student academically and socially, it is also important to consider how the financial pieces factor into their search. So these terms can be confusing, even to those of us who work with them every day, but I wanted to at least introduce them, and we can talk more about them in some of the next two sessions over the course of the spring. So, cost of attendance and student aid index. This is the basic formula for understanding student aid. The cost of attendance is the sticker price to attend a school. The student aid index, formerly referred to as the EFC, or the expected family contribution, is the amount of money it is determined that your family is able to contribute. When you subtract the cost of attendance from the student aid index, you can get a sense of your demonstrated financial need. Because sticker shock is common when looking at the cost of attendance, it's important to thoroughly understand how aid and scholarships work when looking at colleges. So you will hear terms like need blind versus need aware. If a school says that it's need aware, it means your household's ability to afford a college education may affect your admissions outcome. Colleges are open about being need aware or need blind. And need aware does not mean that colleges do not accept students who need aid. A school that is need blind, though, does not consider a student's financial status in determining an admissions outcome. Need-based aid versus merit-based aid. So colleges that meet 100% of demonstrated need sometimes do not offer merit aid. In other words, they operate on financial aid models that are committed to making education broadly accessible to those they accept. So merit-based aid, on the other hand, can come in the form of scholarship programs. Some colleges or universities have separate scholarships that students apply to, while some will automatically consider all students eligible for certain scholarships, and this is often referred to as merit aid. So, does aid cover direct and indirect costs? So, what does that really mean? Direct costs typically refer to costs such as tuition, fees, housing, food, or board, whereas the indirect costs may be the cost of flights or travel to the campus, textbooks, other living expenses. And some colleges will factor those indirect costs into their total packages, while others do not. And this is an important question to ask when you're trying to do a little bit more due diligence in terms of how aid works at the particular schools to which your child is considering applying. Does the school meet 100% of demonstrated need? So this means that a school is committed to meeting the full need in the aid package. So if they meet 100%, they may do so with any combinations of loans, grants, and or scholarships, in addition to what your family is asked to contribute. If this is the case, then a school meets 100% of the demonstrated need. And this is a question that is important to ask along the way because loans, grants, and scholarships are considered at different schools. Loans could be federal, they could be private. Some schools have an expected loan contribution. Other schools are only grants, meaning that you are not having to pay back the aid that you get. Scholarships may be considered, whether this as aid or merit. And some schools will automatically consider your students' eligibility for internal scholarships, while others may ask you to apply in addition to those. There is also some forms that you will likely get familiar with, the CSS profile and FAFSA. CSS is run by the College Board. It is much more in-depth than the FAFSA. Some schools will use the CSS in addition to FAFSA. FAFSA refers to the federal form for student aid. And this is a federal form. Many of you probably heard about the big FAFSA delays in 2024. We are hopeful that 2025 is in a much better path, and early indications show that they are. And then finally, there are resources out there, and all schools now are mandated to have a net price calculator. At some schools, it's done through My Intuition, but you are able to go to the website and enter some basic financial information, 5 questions up to about 15 questions, and get an estimate of how much your family will be asked to pay. So at this point, your child has done some soul searching, talked to trusted friends, advisors, and maybe researched a few options that might seem appealing. And they may have a few schools in mind. So what's next? Well, we like to think of the next step as being fun, or we think it should be fun. And that is to start visiting some of the schools on the list. So one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been that colleges and universities have beefed up their virtual offerings, as you're seeing with us here tonight. And these programs don't seem to be going away. And what that means to you is that that first round of research on colleges can be done from the comfort of your own home with no money invested at a time that works for your child or for multiple people in the family. So it's great that you are thinking about this process so early so you can set an unhurried goal. Maybe that's 2 visits a month through the spring, which would put you in a good place to refine the list later in the summer. So as you look at each school, you may choose to start with a virtual information session. These are the easy and most obvious ones, but also check out what other virtual opportunities may be available for different schools. Some offer a chance to go to virtual classes or have informal conversations with current students, or maybe you can do a virtual tour where you are being led along by a current student who is showing you different buildings on the campus and talking about how they connect with those different buildings and when they use different resources that are part of the campus. So the most important part of these early virtual visits is to be conscientious and to take the time afterwards to take some notes on what you observed, on what your child observed, and understand what was liked and what was disliked about different campuses. Can your students see themselves at this institution? I think it's important to remember that gut reaction is really important. This will be home for the next 4 years, and it will be a lifetime of connections as an alum. And so you want your student to really feel good about it. So after you've cast the net wide on virtual visits, you can begin to narrow this list down and create a much more realistic and balanced list for in-person visits. So as you begin to identify these schools, you will want to start looking a little deeper to begin to understand the different expectations for a school's applicants. And so we'll talk more specifically about that in our April session, but I did want to give a more generalized outline of what you can expect in terms of application deadlines and notification timelines. So, as early as September, schools that offer rolling admissions are likely to have the first round of deadlines. These happen on a rolling basis. So, when you have your application ready, you go ahead and submit. And you may receive decisions on an ongoing basis. Then in November, we get to early applications. There are both early decision, and those are binding applications, and early action, which are non-binding. So November 1, November 15th are two very common deadlines for the early applications. Then in January and February, we see a lot of regular decision application deadlines, and students will get decisions really anywhere from February to April. May 1 marks an important date in college admissions because that is the day that most schools require you to deposit or to confirm enrollment for the fall. So this is a time that waitlist decisions may start to come as classes are looking to be completed and schools have a better sense of how many people are in their class. So we can really go from September to June through the different rounds or cycles of admissions over the course of a child's senior year. So in terms of concrete next steps, just a few guidelines to help you break up the coming months. As we said, in the next 3 to 5 months, a great time to explore, to research, to visit schools to allow you to create a realistic list. Recognizing that virtual can be a great way to do, if not all of the rounds of that visiting, at least the early rounds. And then over the summer before senior year, this is a time where students can continue to fine tune and adapt their list. This will be the time when they are digging into various components of the application, and we will talk through in a later session essay writing and what to include in your activities and what that section of the application looks like. But I think it's important to remember just what a dynamic process this entire next stage is. There will be times when the college search is very much front burner, and it will take a backseat at other times of the year. Some students find this process really exciting and a great opportunity to research and explore, while others may find the unknowns of the process really anxiety provoking and stressful. So, wherever you are, wherever your students are, know that there are many people who can offer assistance, both concrete and existential, to help you navigate the process. So, don't hesitate to reach out to admissions officers, teachers, community based organization mentors, and others to help you. Everyone wants to see you be successful in the next steps, and we are here for you. It's why we are hosting an event like we are tonight and what we will do in the next 2 months. So, with that, I imagine that Sarah has answered many of your questions, but I would love to allow us a chance to dig a little bit deeper into some of these questions. So, Sarah, you've been looking at them. I will let you take the first one.
Thanks, Meg. And good evening, good afternoon, good day for everybody. It's lovely to join you for the last few minutes of our time together. I've been trying to answer as many questions as I have been able to. I'm in the middle of typing out one. So when Meg answers the next question, I'll finish typing and respond to that. But I thought as we could jump in, I will go ahead and answer one or two of the questions here, and then Meg and I will sort of popcorn back and forth from there. So one of the questions that has come in is regarding student aid, and that is, what is the easiest way to determine if a school is need blind or need aware? Is it usually featured on their school website? So it's a great question. It is almost always featured on the school's student aid website. You are also always welcome to reach out to the Office of Student Aid at that particular school, or to reach out to the admissions officer to find out exactly what the student aid policies are for that particular school, as well as relevant deadlines and any information that you will need to provide in order to be considered for financial aid. So my short answer is reach out to the school, check the websites, do some research. And if you don't get an answer from the website, don't hesitate for a second to reach out to the student aid offices or admissions offices, and they can help you.
So I'm seeing a number of questions here about test optional. We know that that is a very popular question. Bowdoin has been test optional since 1969. We were the first school to do this, and the reasons we continue to do this now, I believe, are why they began going test optional all those years ago. We believe that through your transcript, what your teachers are writing about you, your own writing, we have a very good sense of your ability to do the work at Bowdoin. For some students, they do incredibly well on a test. And in that case, by all means, go ahead and submit tests. If you are someone who actually feels as though your performance on a single ACT or SAT does not give a full indication of who you are as a student, don't feel compelled to submit the test. When we say test optional, we very much mean test optional. And just as a stat, last year, or our current first years, 54% of that class did not submit tests. So it's really important to understand for the schools to which you are applying what their perspective on testing is. And the pandemic made that world very hazy, and we have test optional. We are seeing more schools go back to required tests. We know that some schools are test blind, so even if you do submit, they won't even look at it. So it's very important to understand what a school what their policy on testing is. And that is something that should be very clear on the website. If you are there in person, it is a question that you very much can answer, and you should be able to get a, an answer as to how that particular admissions office is covering the thoughts on testing.
I'm going to jump in and try to answer a question a little bit that talked about summer opportunities for students at Bowdoin, as well as internships. And I'm going to broaden it out actually a little bit to speak for a moment about our Career Exploration and Development Office. It's called CXD in the Bowdoin lingo. And what it is it's an office that will work with students starting in the first year, from the moment they enter campus, to help students to consider opportunities to build their skills, to explore broadly different career interests, different summer opportunities, et cetera, and then to really start to put into action what they might want to pursue and might want to explore after graduation, as well as utilizing their summers. There's a lot of different ways that this happens. So over the summertime, Bowdoin does support over 100 students through funded internship opportunities. So these are opportunities where a student may find an internship at an organization that they are really passionate about working for, and they're excited to gain this experience, but perhaps the organization isn't able to pay them in order to spend their time. As a result, Bowdoin, they can apply for and receive support from Bowdoin in order to pursue that what would have been an unfunded internship otherwise. So that's one opportunity. In addition to that, Bowdoin also, through summer research, supports a number of faculty mentored research positions. There are currently over 200 faculty mentored research positions over the course of every year that take place, as well as numerous summer opportunities. And these are ways for our students to gain really hands-on, great in-depth experience doing research alongside faculty members who are leaders in their field of expertise, and renowned scholars in their field. So it's an opportunity for students to gain really great experience either right here on campus or in other areas as well. And then we also have one other piece that I want to mention, which is our sophomore boot camp, which is an incredible opportunity for all of our sophomores who are required to come back a few days before the end of their winter break. And they actually come back, and at the end of 4 days of spending together and doing this boot camp, that students will have a polished resume, a cover letter in hand, they will have a LinkedIn profile, they will have had some experience learning how to network, they will have actually connected with alumni, they will have practiced interviewing, and they'll have a new toolbox of both skills and strategies to utilize as they consider internship and summer opportunities and research over the course of their time at Bowdoin.
Great. Very helpful to hear all that. I'm seeing some questions about GPA and how Bowdoin looks at grades and rigor. And we do not recalculate GPAs. Some schools do. We take what GPA the school gives us. We are ideally going to look at weighted, but for schools that don't offer weighted, we look at the unweighted. We are aided in this process of reviewing the transcript by something called the school profile. So your guidance office at your individual schools sends us what is called a school profile. And this document gives us a sense of how many advanced courses are offered. Are there APs offered? Is this an international baccalaureate program? Maybe APs have been done away with by your district or by your independent school, and they're now different forms of advanced schools. So we look very carefully at that profile. We also read geographically. So we have territories that over the years we've gotten to know. We know how these schools work. We have seen applicants from previous years and what their transcript looked like. So we are, I think, very thoughtfully looking not just at the GPA, but the rigor and how a student has taken advantage of the rigor that's offered. Now, that is not to say that if you are at a school where there are 25 APs offered, that you are expected to have taken all 25 of those. We hope you won't. We believe that students need to sleep and they need to spend time with their family and friends and they need to do other things outside of the classroom. But we also appreciate that Bowdoin is a rigorous place and we want to make sure that they have done the work in their classrooms today to be able to prepare for that. So your school is not going to be penalized if they don't offer APs. We are really looking very holistically and contextually at the transcripts and what the teachers are saying about the academic progression that your student has had.
There's a question in here that I am always happy to answer about the interviews. And I want to sort of blast it out for a second and talk about the opportunity. If a school offers interviews at any school, it is a really great opportunity for you to have a chance to have a conversation with somebody who either works in the admissions office or with a student who works for the school or with an alumnus of the school. And so if you get the opportunity to do an interview, I highly encourage you to consider it if it is available to you. Specific to Bowdoin, I can talk a little bit about our interview process. We do have an optional interview that is available to all of our applicants. You are able to do an interview in the application round for which you are applying. So within the year that you are planning to matriculate to Bowdoin or onto college. Typically it will be in your senior year. And so we start interviews at the beginning of the summer. So usually around June 1st or so, we will begin offering interviews and they will continue until usually our December 1st deadline and slightly after for some of our alumni interviews. So these interviews take place, they can be done with a staff member here on campus or virtually. They can be done, the bulk of them are done by one of our alums who is part of this Bravo program that we have of alumni interviewers, or are done by a senior interviewer. Does not matter who you interview with. It is a 30-minute conversation. It is meant to be that, a conversation, not anything else. It's really meant to be for an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about Bowdoin and ask questions, as well as for us to have a chance to get to know you a little bit more. So it's really meant to be casual, informal, not something you stress out over. We do offer them, as I mentioned, either in person while you're here on campus, or sometimes while we're on the road, we may do interviews, or oftentimes they will take place virtually. It really is up to you, and it does not matter the sort of the format of it or who you interview with. We're just glad to have a chance to talk to you.
I'm seeing a number of questions here about early decision. So at Bowdoin, we have two different early decision rounds. Early decision 1 is due November 15th, and you typically hear within a month. And early decision 2 is typically due in early January, and you will hear within a month. We do not have early action. So the only way you apply early to Bowdoin is through early decision, which is a binding commitment. You will get one of 3 decisions. Obviously, admit is the greatest decision to receive. We will also defer students who we believe are very strong, but we hope to sort of want to see the larger regular decision pool and how they may compare. And then we are going to refuse students who we feel are unlikely, are not going to be getting into Bowdoin in our regular decision round, and we want to give them the opportunity to go and apply to other schools that may be a better fit for them in the regular decision round. Um, in recent years, we've accepted a little bit more than 50% of our class in the 2 early decision rounds. So years ago, early decision 2 was a really small pool, and that in more recent years has grown. And so those 2 pools are pretty close in size, the early decision 1 and early decision 2. I think it is important, though, to remember that we are going out with more letters of acceptance with our regular decision round, because that will not be 100% yield for us. We know that students will have other decisions, and we are not necessarily their first choice. There was a question about how you can get out of an early decision commitment with a financial issue. I would just encourage anyone who is considering applying early decision to do the net price calculator, whether it's at Bowdoin or to the school where you are applying, just to have as accurate a representation, because it is much easier to have a conversation down the line with the financial aid office if that projected number is very different from an offer that comes later. So of course, individual conversations when situations change will happen, but the expectation is that it is a binding commitment. So I hope that answers general early decision. Oh, and I should just say, for those students who are deferred in early decision 1 or early decision 2, you will be considered again in the regular decision round. So if you've applied early decision 1 and been deferred, you're not going to be considered in early decision 2. You will be considered for both of those as deferrals in the regular decision round.
There was a question about the Common App essay prompts, and looking ahead to fall 26, those of you who may be applying. At this point, we are not anticipating, not guaranteeing, but we are not anticipating any changes to our Common Application essay prompts. Therefore, so there are a number of Common App general essay prompts that you can choose to respond to. And then in addition to that, Bowdoin does offer 2 supplemental opportunities to submit 250-word essays if you so choose. The first one is, and we anticipate that these will remain the same going forward, again for next year. The first one is one we're especially proud of. It is, we will give you The Offer of the College, which is a 12-line poem written by William DeWitt Hyde. He was one of our early Bowdoin presidents. And it asks you it sort of gives you these a number of phrases that together constitute what we see as the best 4 years of your life. And so we will ask you to take a look at the offer of the college, to choose the line that resonates with you, and to tell us a little bit about why that resonates with you. We really love this prompt. We love the responses that we get from it. We love what we learn about our applicants through through those prompts. And there's another optional prompt response that you can also answer if you'd like, that asks you to really think about it and reflect how you navigate through difference, and to tell us a little bit about the ways in which you have done that or think about that process. So those are the two prompts that we've had as optional in addition to the regular Common App prompts, and you are welcome to assume that they safely assume for Bowdoin anyway that they will remain the same for next year.
So there's a question in here about some additional supplements, and Bowdoin does have, we've talked about optional testing. Sarah spoke about the optional interviews. We do have an optional art supplement. And so this is for students who have had art as a very important part of their life to date, whether they want to major in one of the three art departments, that's music, visual arts, or theater and dance, or whether they just want to be part of the very robust offerings from an extracurricular standpoint. And we welcome students to submit supplements. If you are someone who's both a dancer and a musician, feel free to submit a supplement in both of those areas. We will send them out to the relevant departments so that faculty who are knowledgeable and much more informed about the arts than Sarah or me or our colleagues will review it, and they will submit a quick evaluation back to us that gives an indication of sort of the talent and how that student would be welcomed on campus given the arts. So I think I would just emphasize, if you know that art is a really important part of who you are and what you hope to do, it would be a great idea to submit that optional piece.
There's a question here. How do you consider community service as part of an application? And I think what this draws to, for me anyway, is the idea of one of the pieces of, or one of the values that we look at in considering applications is our commitment to Bowdoin's commitment to the common good. And that is the opportunity to really to serve and to provide service in some capacity that is meant to be more than just for yourself, but for others, to the benefit of society. And so we're thinking a lot about that. And a lot of our students are oftentimes drawn to this commitment, Bowdoin's commitment to the common good. And so that is something that we oftentimes do see in applicants, is that they have engaged in service of some kind. It varies from applicant to applicant. It is not something that is required. Some students have more access and more time and more ability to pursue service in a variety of different capacities. And so it's not a requirement. It's something that oftentimes we do see, and oftentimes students are drawn to Bowdoin because of this commitment to the common good that oftentimes does play out in service in some capacity in applications.
So there is a question here about our optional video response, and I should have included that when I was talking about the 4 optional pieces, because the video response is the 4th one. And what this means, and this is a great question because it's asked by someone who says their child is very shy and this makes them very nervous. I will reiterate, this is optional. We certainly don't expect everybody to do it. We know that it works for some, and others are starting to sweat just with the idea of the possibility of doing it. And so we see it as another way to learn more about the student. We, as you can imagine, do a lot of reading between November and March, and we are reading essays, and we are reading about extracurriculars, and we are reading letters of recommendation. And it's really quite lovely to be able to push play on a video and hear a story that a student chooses to share with us. We have seen nervous students and we get it, and we are not going to hold anything in the video response against them. I think in many ways it shows some courage and it shows an ability to take a risk. And we've seen a whole range of scenarios. The school student who thinks that they have quiet in their room and suddenly their roommate walks in, slams the door, and starts cursing, or the student at home whose dog suddenly decides to welcome the mailman with hysteric barking fit. That is not going to be used against the student. And so we really see it as another way to hear from the student what's important for them to share about their interest in Bowdoin, their connections with others, whatever the question is that asks. So again, don't want to put pressure on people. It works for some people. For those where it feels like it's a mismatch, don't worry about doing it and sort of let that go.
Mhm. There is a question about describing the Brunswick community that surrounds Bowdoin and the ways in which our students engage in service outside of the actual sort of Bowdoin campus. We have a wonderful center on campus that's called the McKean Center for the Common Good. And again, this goes back to what I was just talking about of sort of Bowdoin's deep-seated commitment to the common good and to serving others. It does play itself out, and the huge number of programs that are sort of affiliated and sponsored through the McKean Center. And this provides students with the opportunity to engage in service, direct service in our community in areas that include areas such as like mentoring in schools, where we have a number of programs that are supported and that students go out to and spend time with area students. We have programs that will address food insecurity in the community, that work at local homeless shelters in the area, that go to Portland and work with Portland Housing Authority, as well as adult literacy programs. We work with immigrant and refugee programs. We work with art therapy programs. We work with students with disabilities across the spectrum. There are a number of programs that our students are able to engage with depending on what they're interested in. We also have a wonderful program called Multilingual Manners that our students who speak another language will go into elementary schools in the area and work with students on learning how to speak other languages. The really, really robust programs. These programs, we do provide transportation to and from them. We will provide you with support as well as reflective opportunities to really think about what service means in these communities and the ways in which we engage with it meaningfully. So there's a lot of different possibilities for meaningful ways to engage outside of the community. I also want to point out for students who are interested in gaining, who might be interested in the pre-health track, so in gaining some either clinical or other experiences in the area, we have a strong partnership with Oasis Free Clinics, which provides free healthcare to Mid-Coast area families and individuals. And so we have students who are able to walk straight from campus over there to engage with in clinical experience, working with Oasis Free Clinic, as well as other areas and local hospitals as well.
I see a question about repeating what I said about need-aware admissions. I think this is an important one. Bowdoin is need blind, meaning that when we are reviewing students' applications, we are not looking at the family's ability to pay. At need aware admissions, at schools that are need aware, and I will acknowledge that I have never worked at a school like that. It is my understanding that in the admissions process, students are looked at with a budget in mind of what they can cover, and decisions are made based on who the student is, what they bring to campus, and how much aid they are looking for. This is an important question to ask at the schools to which you are looking that are need aware, because every institution will do this a little bit differently. But what we want to underscore is a need-aware school is certainly going to take many, many students that are applying for financial aid. There is a budget for that. They are just more limited in how many of those students they can take. So a good question to ask of the schools to which you are considering. And I will just make the general point, we're not going to get into the specifics of financial aid. I've seen a number of questions about forms and all the rest. We have fabulous colleagues over in the student aid office who, over the course of the year, do a number of financial aid presentations virtually in the evenings, and those will be upcoming later this spring and in the fall, and those are good ones to just plug in for.
There have been a number of questions about the sort of roughly, and I'm going to bucket them together, that are asking about sort of the values that we seek as admissions officers in constructing a class of incredible Bowdoin students. Very generally, and I haven't done an information session in several months, so I'm like going back and clearing out the cobwebs of this, but very generally, the things that we are looking for across in any number of different applications and things we typically see in students who are really successful at Bowdoin is evidence of curiosity, particularly intellectual curiosity, of an interest in pursuing things that they're passionate about and in really understanding them and seeking opportunities to explore them further. We seek students who are aware, who show awareness, both of themselves and of others, and of the space that they occupy and the impact that it has on others around them. We look for evidence of kindness to come through in the application. Is this a good school citizen, a good person, someone that would make a good roommate and a good classmate? We look for students who are willing to take intellectual risks, who are not willing to put themselves out there, who pursue rigor for the sake of learning, and who are interested and engaged in their intellectual pursuits. Um, I think those are sort of the major pieces of it. We look for students who are good people and who are going to be excited to be in the classroom and engaging in challenging conversations and discussions, and who want to also participate in the life of this college. 99% of our 90 over 90% of our students live on campus, and we are looking for students who are excited to be part of this small, close-knit residential community. I hope that helps a little bit.
Great. So many great questions that are coming through here, and I apologize that we won't get to all of them. We will have two more of these sessions as we spoke about and invite you to come back for those. Um, I will just answer one more question and maybe give Sarah the chance to have one final question. And now I've lost it. But I, I think one of the questions that I thought was important to get an understanding of sort of how we look at it is how students should use the additional information section in the essay process. We will talk more, obviously, about the application process later, but students have a chance to add any additional information. This may be explaining why they weren't able to take French in their senior year because it conflicted with other classes. This may be a time to tell us that they have a 90-minute commute each way to school. Additional information is not expected out of everyone. If you feel your situation, whatever it is, needs further explaining, we welcome your child to offer that. But again, it is not a required part of the application.
I'm going to put in a last, rather than trying to get to another question at this point, because I think we're right at 9 o'clock. I am instead going to put in a plug for you to all join us and bring friends and bring others for the next in the series. This is going to take place on March 19th. It's a Wednesday from March 19th, yeah, from 8 to 9 p.m. And in that conversation, Meg and I are going to talk about sort of what does holistic review actually mean? How do we look at all the different parts of an application? Is test optional really optional. A lot of the things we've sort of touched briefly on here this evening, we're going to talk about what matters in a college application, what Bowdoin admissions officers as well as admissions officers in general might be looking at and looking for when considering admissions to certain schools. And so we're going to be touching on all these different things, and we hope that it will answer a lot more of the wonderful questions that you're asking, as well as go into a little bit more depth and answer more questions as well. So we hope that you will choose to join us for that. You can find information on our website and on the admissions webpage. And Meg, I'll let you have the final word.
I just want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We hope you found it informative. For those of you who tuned in late, for others who may have left early, this will be available on our website within the next week or so. And we just thank you for your time and hope that this was helpful, and wish everyone a good evening, a good day, and all best wishes. Take care.